Hello everyone and welcome to Plugged Into Heritage. Today we are filming from the courthouse in Gagetown, Queens County, New Brunswick. We will be showing you some of Anthony Flower's paintings. Joining us today, we have Bruce Thompson, President of Queens County Heritage. So Bruce, what can you tell us about Anthony Flower?
Well, thank you, Victoria, and hello everyone. This is the latest in our series of videos about Anthony Flower and his family and his work. Anthony Flower was born in March of 1792, Old Gravel Lane, London. When he was a young boy, his father leased a farm outside of the city, Little Heath Farm, and that's where Anthony grew up, where he went to school. We believe he would have received some training in art. The earliest painting that we have is from about 1805 when he was only 12, 13 years old, and it's quite an accomplished work. We don't have it in our collection, unfortunately, but we do know that it exists. He came to New Brunswick in 1817 on one of his father's ships, and we're not sure why he decided to stay in New Brunswick, but he did. And by the spring of 1818, he has purchased a farm at MacDonalds Corner and has built a little house. He married in 1820 to the daughter of a neighbor, Mary Green. They had 4 children, and he basically farmed for the rest of his life, and he painted. To date, we have sourced almost 300 paintings that he did throughout his lifetime. We have approximately 100 here in the collection of Queens County Heritage, but the other 200 are spread all over the world in private and public collections around the world. So what we thought we would do today is show some of the pieces from the Queens County Heritage Collection, which is a really good representation of the type of work that Anthony Flower was doing. I'd also like to pay recognition and tribute to a person who has done a huge amount of work on Anthony Flower over the past 20 years, and if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't know half as much as we know about Anthony Flower, and that's research associate Anne Lowe from Fredericton, who took a keen interest in the work of Anthony Flower and did a huge amount of research and contacted family members and owners of paintings all over the world, and gathered all that material together and really helped us understand the life and work of Anthony Flower. So the first work we want to show you is probably his best portrait that he did, and it's of his wife, Mary Green Flower. Painted in 1836, it is signed and dated. There exists a portrait of Mary for every decade of their marriage. So there are quite a number of them, and we see Mary as she grows older and matures through their marriage. This particular portrait really tells us a lot about Mary, how beautiful she was, but also a little bit about the life of the Flower family. If you have visited the house, you know it's a very ordinary little farmhouse. It expanded as the family grew, so not a lot of pretension in the house. It's very simple, very plain. But if you look at this portrait of Mary, she's beautifully dressed in this pink dress with the big puff sleeves, which were typical of the 1830s. She has a beautiful hairstyle with the ribbons and curls. She's wearing a pair of beautiful drop gold earrings. She has a gold necklace that she has. So it really gives us a sense of what was going on in the Flower house, that she had fashionable clothes and fashionable accessories as well. So as I said, the Flowers had 4 children altogether. The next 2 paintings that we're going to look at, one is of his son James and James's wife Mary Matilda Clark. These were painted in 1864 And again, they tell us a lot about the life of the Flower family and Anthony Flower's art. In the days before photography, of course, having your portrait painted was the only way that an image could be done. So the Flower family was very fortunate that an artist was in the family and he could capture all the likenesses of the family. But again, with these two portraits, they were done as companion pieces, so they're framed identically and they're the same size. So with James, we have this lovely 1860s hairstyle, but the jacket, the bright blue bow tie, and the waistcoat that he's wearing. If we look at the daughter-in-law, Mary Matilda Clark Flower, the ringlets in her hair, the brooch that she's wearing at her neck, and this fine, lovely yellow dress with the ruffles at the cuffs and so on. Very typical fashions of the late 1850s and early 1860s. Very common in some families in Queens County, in New Brunswick, to have what's called a family record and have that either printed, but in Anthony Flower's case, he did one that was hand painted. So we have the Flower family record here, painted by Anthony. We have little cherubs in the corners, the sun rays, the roses, and family record and examples of his printing. So it says Anthony Flower, Mary Green, their birth dates. They were married on the 4th of July, 1820, and then it lists the births and marriages and deaths within the family. With family records, you can often figure out the time period based upon the handwriting that's for the vital statistics that are recorded. If they're all in the same hand around a particular birth date, then you know. So this one we know probably dates to about 1840, 1850. The marriages and then the deaths are in a different hand, and the one death, his daughter Mary Chase, is recorded in 1922. So we know that this was stayed within the family, and they continued to update it for many decades, long after Anthony Flower had passed away. There's a really poignant part of this family record. We know that Anthony and Mary had a very close relationship. Again, she was his muse, his subject for a variety of portraits over the years. They obviously had 4 children, but as evidence of their close relationship, when Mary died, he recorded Mary's death here on the family record. And he says, "My dear died, D-I-D-E, September 13, 1867, 6 o'clock in the evening." And in the collection, in our collection here, but also in the collection of the New Brunswick Museum, there are 2 more portraits of Mary Flower. And we believe they're actually painted after she died. They're posthumous portraits. She's a much older woman, and she doesn't look very well in either painting. But again, with the inscription and the fact that he did these 2 paintings at the time of her death or shortly thereafter indicates the relationship that they had. So Anthony is painting portraits of family, but he's also painting portraits of other people in the community. And another example we have of that is Dr. William Bell Little that we have here. Dr. Little was from England, so there was a bit of a relationship there because Anthony was from England. He seemed to associate with those who were from immigrants like himself. Dr. Little came out and was the local physician in the Washtenaw Lake area for several decades. And this portrait is done in profile, but it shows the detail of Dr. Little's curly hair, but also the white forelock, which is a Little family trait, genetic trait that carries down through the family. So along with portraits of family and friends and other people in the community, over the last few years we've learned a lot about the other subjects and inspirations for Anthony Flower. And he was very prolific with the painting of landscapes. And early on, when we looked at his landscapes, we were thinking that perhaps they were local scenes or places that he visited. Well, there are a couple of instances, a couple of examples where he did paint local scenes, but most of these pieces are from faraway lands and other places that he was inspired by something else. And a good example of that is this painting that was done about 1860. It's a coastal scene in England. We weren't sure what the inspirational source was for this until a couple of years after we received the painting. We received another collection of Anthony Flower material, and in it was this print that we have. And the print served as his inspiration for the actual painting. So the print was published in London in 1816, and if Flower got it when it was new, that means this was something that he brought with him in 1817. He modified the composition a little bit, but it's still fairly readily identifiable. So we have a whole variety of other works that are in the collection. We have a series of loose paintings that are unframed, and we have them in this little book. They're under plastic so that protects them. And I'll just flip through a few of them here. This is a work that appeared in the Illustrated London News, which a lot of his inspirations did. Here we have a scene from Australia. Here we have an image of the Queen of Prussia. And one of the things Anthony Flower did is that he often painted on the back of the same painting. So we have the Queen on one side, and then we have this castle scene on the opposite side. In this particular piece, sometimes paintings have a rough life. And at some point, this painting served as lunch for a mouse. On the back side, we have a sketch of a hand. We have a scene of Niagara Falls after a William Henry Bartlett print. And here we have a scene from South Africa. So he was clearly interested in landscapes and images from faraway places. He was interested in what was happening in the art world in Europe. Where was he getting this information? They're coming from the periodicals of the day, like the Illustrated London News, the Illustrated Times. They were periodicals, of course, that by their very names were illustrating the news. It was not only current events, but they were following what was happening in the art world, what was happening in theater, what was happening in travel, and so on. So there'd be a whole range of images that would be in these periodicals. And that inspired Anthony Flower to then copy them and turn them into full-color paintings. So here we even have one that was related to a story about an art exhibition at the Royal Academy. And this is a painting called The Wind on Shore that was illustrated in the Illustrated London News, and then Flower did his copy of it. We showed the hand a couple of minutes ago, but here we have a companion of a foot. And there were numerous drawing books and artistic art training sources that were available. And Obviously, Flower had access to some of those, that he could do sketches and paintings of various parts of the anatomy to help improve his portraiture and his painting overall. The foot is quite a large painting, and it is signed A. Flower, 1840. Here we have an image that's also from the Illustrated London News, and it's called Glen Tilt near the Marble Lodge, and this is a Scottish scene from the Illustrated London News. As Queen Victoria and Prince Albert started making trips to Scotland, and after they constructed Balmoral Castle, a lot of articles and so on were appearing in the Illustrated London News about their travels and the scenery in and around Scotland. This was one of them. This is also another example of Anthony Flower painting on both sides of a work. So I'll just turn it over carefully here. And here on the back side, we have another scene from the Illustrated London News from the 1850s called Loudwater Mill near Watford. The really interesting thing about this piece is that it looks like a pen and ink sketch in black and white, but it is actually a watercolor. But he was simply using the blacks and grays of the colors that he was working with, just doing a little experiment with something that would appear to be in black and white. We're always very keen to find the sources of Anthony Flower's work, because that is a window into his mind and what interested him. So this next work is one of our favorites because it is of Madame Celeste of America. Now, Madame Celeste was an American actress, and this image appeared in the Illustrated London News, and it was talking about her visit to the London stage, the British stage. And Madame Celeste was known for playing both male and female roles in the theater. So here she is dressed in a male role with a little mustache and goatee here. So this must have fascinated Anthony Flower. And you think, he's a Baptist deacon at this point. This is a little racy for a Baptist deacon in the middle of the 19th century. We can also tell from this work that it was part of a book or some kind of sketchbook at some time. You can see the little pinholes here, but you can see where things have been cut from it. To date, we have determined that there have been about 7 books of paintings that Anthony Flower put together. Originally, we called them sketchbooks, but some of them really aren't. They're basically like his own personal coffee table books of his works of art. So Madame Celeste was in one of those books, but we have a couple more here as well to show you. So here we have one that's actually marked. It says Anthony Flower. He calls it a sketchbook, 1866. He often recorded his birth on his paintings, and he has in this book as well. So born March 1792. This one is a bit more of a sketchbook, where it has, here we have the sketch of a bird, and then we have his completed work of a bullfinch here on the side. And then there's some other examples throughout the book. These are homemade. You can see the back cover of this book has a little bit of writing on it. So he just took whatever scraps of paper he had at home and created these homemade books. The most intact book of paintings that we have is this one. And we'll just open it carefully here so you can see how it looks on the inside. Again, very homemade and bound. And I'll just close this one away so we can turn this around so you can see. Here, this image is taken from the Illustrated London News, but he painted it and added his own Anthony Flower 1847 into the book plate itself. But within this particular book, there are a whole variety of scenes inspired by images from the Illustrated London News, the Illustrated Times, and I'll just open these up, and you can see there's a whole variety of different types of work. So political leaders, military leaders. Here we have an image from the European revolutions of 1848. This is revolutionary Paris, France. He also had an interest in ships and the sea. And here we have one of our favorite images of a full-rigged ship, again taken from the Illustrated London News. And I mentioned earlier how the Illustrated London News was talking about what was happening in the art world and in the theater world. This is a theater scene, theatrical scene in the Illustrated London News. One of the most detailed paintings that we have in the Flower collection is this piece with all of the colors he's capturing in the robes and all of the people that are in the back, and again the detail on some of the people here on the side. This book probably has another dozen paintings in it. Now, our work on Anthony Flower, our research really never ends. We have sourced probably 2/3 of the paintings. There are about 90 that either they're portraits and we don't know who the people are, or they are scenes that we haven't quite identified just yet. So one of the pieces that we have, we just recently found out what its source was. So as I say, our work continues, and in the winter, late 2019 and early 2020, we found an online resource of the Illustrated Times. Now, we've known for quite some time that a lot of Anthony Flower's inspirations have come from the Illustrated Times. So to find this online resource, it was fantastic for us. So we started to go through page by page by page to see if we could identify the sources of inspiration for some of Anthony Flower's paintings. And one that we'd been looking for a very long time was this one that we called Night Scene with Moon and Haystacks. And we've gone through the Illustrated London News, couldn't quite source it, but sure enough, it was in the Illustrated Times. And it's a painting, a work called The Harvest Moon by Alfred Slater. And a black and white image appeared in the Illustrated Times, and obviously something that caught Anthony Flower's interest. So even in the last few months, we continue to identify the sources of some of Anthony Flower's paintings. He also seemed to have an interest in the old master painters of from centuries ago. And we have a couple of examples here. These are copies of two works by the artist Raphael. And neither has appeared in the illustrated periodicals that we know of. We don't have the source of a print. We're quite sure he wouldn't have seen them in person, but he has seen something, a print or a periodical that we haven't found yet. And then he decided to do his version. So we have the Cumean Sibyl by Raphael here, and then we have the Virgin and Child by Raphael here that Flower has copied. We know this particular work has been reproduced quite substantially, so the odds are that he would have seen it as a printer in one of the periodicals. We also have copies of Rembrandts in the Flower collection as well. So he had this interest in some of these old master artists. In the collection, we also have a pamphlet for the ordering of prints, and nothing on the list matches anything we have in the collection, but that also indicates to us that he was ordering prints whenever they were available and getting those in the house, and then he is doing copies of those works. The last two pieces that we have, again, tell us something else about Anthony Flower and the Flower family. These are two works that are from literature. So the first work is from a book of poetry published in the 1830s, and the poem that this image comes from was called The Gondola. And in the original work, it's a black and white print, of course, and a woman sitting. This is a window in a gondola. So that attracted Anthony Flower's interest, and he produced this work. He also produced another painting from a print in that book of poetry. So whether the book of poetry was in his personal library or whether he borrowed it, either way, it tells us that he or someone in the family had an interest in poetry. The last work we have had been a mystery to us for a very long time. And in the museum world, if we don't know a title, we often assign a title, like the night scene with moon and haystacks. This work we just simply called Two Ladies or Two Court Women. But it is actually a scene from one of Sir Walter Scott's novels. And at the time, in the 1820s and 1830s and beyond, often, like books of poetry, publishers would insert images of some of the characters in a particular novel, scattered throughout the novel. And this is Rebecca and Rowena from one of Walter Scott's novels. So again, it tells us that Anthony Flower either had that book in his personal library or he had borrowed it from someone else. So that is a bit of an overview of the work of Anthony Flower. And if you want to see some of these works in person, by 2021, we hope we have moved beyond our situation in 2020 and the Flower House will be open again. We showcase a selection of the Anthony Flower paintings in the gallery at his house every summer. Every few years we do a major exhibition of his works as well. Darn it, you missed it in 2018. We were celebrating the bicentennial of his house, and we had all 100 works that we have in our collection were exhibited here in the courthouse. But for preservation purposes, to keep the paintings around for a very long time, we're going to give them all a rest now, and just a few of them will be put out on display every now and again. And an occasion like today, where we can get a few of them out for you to have a look at and get an overview of Anthony Flower, and we look forward to learning more about Anthony Flower as our research continues and as more paintings actually appear and come to us to be cataloged and preserved. So, back to you, Victoria.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and thank you everyone for watching. If you'd like to see more of our videos, please check them out on Facebook. Bye!